Everyone was seeking refuge in the attic. My 6-year-old daughter had already dashed into my in-laws' house without waiting for me. My in-laws, who were supposed to be resting due to illness, were nowhere to be found. Anxiety surged through me, and my palms began to sweat. "Hello? Is anyone here?" I called out, but the house was eerily silent. Just then, my daughter, Maya, displaying an uncanny sense of direction, bounded up to the second floor without a second thought. As I stepped into the stifling attic, the heat enveloped me like a sauna. To my surprise, I found my in-laws in a completely unexpected state. Another realization struck me. I was 34 years old and named Sasha. My gifted first grader, Maya, was about to show her extraordinary abilities once again. "Daddy, look! I'm wearing my new dress for school today." She twirled excitedly in front of the living room table, striking a pose like a model. "Oh, that's lovely," I replied. Meanwhile, my husband, Harris, who was 2 years younger, barely acknowledged her, his eyes glued to his smartphone. "Hey, Daddy, you're being really rude," Maya's voice rang out, pulling me away from breakfast. I walked over, trying to intervene. "Maya, sweetie, let's be patient. Daddy's busy right now, okay?" Tried to talk nicely to him. But Harris remained oblivious, still focused on his screen. While his dedication to work was commendable, I often felt lost in the chaos of parenting during these hectic days. One summer morning, Harris unexpectedly forbade us from visiting my in-laws. I used to take Maya there often since it was just a 15-minute walk from our home. She adored them. They always treated her with such kindness. "Shouldn't we visit them, especially if they're unwell?" I expressed my concern. Harris sighed and replied, "Maya might catch a cold from them. You've been visiting so much. Maybe it's worn them out." His words stung, and I felt a wave of offense wash over me. My in-laws were always happy to see Maya. Still, I resolved to comply. "Fine," I said. Feeling the weight of his decision, he turned back to his phone, not sparing us a glance. When Harris left for work, Maya, looking anxious, prepared for her last day of the first term. When Maya returned from school with her report card, I praised her for her excellent grades, but she looked downcast. "I want to see Grandpa and Grandma," she insisted, fidgeting with her bangs as she bombarded me with questions. Maya had a remarkable intuition, and her restlessness hinted that something significant was about to unfold. Last spring, during a hike with my in-laws, she had insisted on taking a more challenging trail. We ended up finding a lost hiker who was overjoyed to see us, tears of relief streaming down his face. Another time, while visiting a friend, Maya insisted on going to the rooftop. Trusting her instincts, we encountered someone contemplating suicide and managed to talk them down. Each time, she had fiddled with her bangs as if sensing something beyond the ordinary. "Okay, you're right. I'm worried about Grandma and Grandpa, too. Let's visit them," I conceded, feeling a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Even though Harris had forbidden it, my concern for their health outweighed everything else. Maya's behavior had grown increasingly concerning, so I decided to take her to see them. After a sweaty 15-minute walk, we arrived, the relentless buzz of cicadas filling the air. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. We exchanged uncertain glances, and Maya and I agreed to use the spare key to let ourselves in. Inside, the silence was deafening. Are they out somewhere, even though they're sick? I wondered aloud, but before I could voice my confusion, Maya was already heading upstairs, her curiosity guiding her. "Mom, everyone is hiding in the attic. Why would they be there?" she declared, charging ahead, her small figure disappearing from my sight as I peered into the stuffy attic, which typically served as a storage space. My eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you okay?" I gasped, taking in the shocking sight of my in-laws tied up on the floor. I called out to them, but their responses were barely audible. In a panic, I quickly dialed for an ambulance, my heart racing as I waited for help to arrive. What happened here? A surge of fury coursed through me at whoever had harmed my in-laws. This was unforgivable. That day, my priorities shifted to uncovering the truth and ensuring justice would be served. I began plotting my response. With summer break just ending, I arranged for Maya to spend the night at my parents' house. As I dropped her off, I noticed her absent-mindedly caressing her bangs again. Open the drawer in Dad's room and call the number on that little piece of paper. I instructed her. Okay, I'll let Mom take care of everything. I felt a mix of confusion and curiosity about the mysterious call she mentioned, but I trusted that it would lead to something significant. Maya had a unique knack for uncovering hidden truths. 2 days after discovering my in-laws, I approached my husband with a heavy heart as he came home from work, my resolve firm. I received a call with the shocking news that my mother-in-law and father-in-law had died. "Hey!" Hara exclaimed, startled. She bombarded me with questions about whether it was true. They had been found entangled together. My husband, Harris, glanced at me, his expression shifting to one of understanding as I struggled to find the right words. It must have been a burglary. There's no other explanation for them being tied up like that. Of course, that's the only explanation, he insisted, determined to attribute it to a robbery. I narrowed my eyes and shot him a venomous look. You really think so? That you did it for the insurance money and inheritance? Unbelievable. I could never stoop that low. He clicked his tongue in annoyance, pulling out his smartphone to distract himself. Seriously? You're on your phone even now? Is stock trading really that pressing? Startled, he looked up from the screen, suddenly defensive. I retrieved 2 papers from the shelf and laid them on the coffee table. You're not just glued to your phone to recover your investment losses, are you? How do you? I waved the papers in his face, revealing a printout of an email alert about a staggering $80,000 stock loss. My daughter had urged me to check the other document, which led me to discover an $80,000 debt hidden in her study. Little did I know that Harris had begun investing recklessly, sinking us into a substantial financial hole. His complexion turned pale as he processed the evidence, anger flashing across his face. Is it a wife's job to go rummaging through other people's things? Well, if you're going to frame it that way, is it a husband's job to fish around for other women and cheat? I shot back, pulling up more evidence of Harris's infidelity, emails, photos, and schedules with his mistress. My heart sank as I uncovered the truth, and I almost collapsed when I found a business card from the woman he was seeing tucked in the back of the drawer. It was a remnant from a seedy affair. The business card was the very piece of paper Maya had mentioned. I glared at my husband, then shoved the pile of printed emails and photos toward him. You have a mistress and a mountain of debt. Did you really think you could start fresh with the inheritance and insurance money? To my astonishment, Harris began to laugh. Wow, in such a short time, you've uncovered all this. Impressive for someone with so much free time. Were you also hoping to snag my parents' money? He completely misinterpreted my investigation as a scheme to get his parents' inheritance while dismissing the gravity of their death. Sitting back on the sofa, he crossed his legs and grinned. Well, you know, a beautiful 20-year-old woman has become infatuated with me. I'm bored of an old hack with a kid. He gazed at me absently, chatting casually, even puffing out his nostrils as if he was completely unfazed. His nonchalance made me feel utterly revolting. I can cover it all with the inheritance, he declared confidently. I messed up in my investments. This is just a fresh start, a valuable lesson for me. He spoke as if he had no care for the financial turmoil he had caused, displaying not a hint of regret or self-reflection. That's unacceptable, I shouted, my anger rising. Harris, however, merely flashed a smug, arrogant grin. There's no evidence I treated my parents well. It makes sense that the inheritance would come to me. Isn't that the way it should be? Feeling cocky and increasingly lighthearted, he started to laugh. It's all absolutely wrong. His booming voice echoed through the house. Shock coursed through him as he turned to see my father-in-law standing there. "Dad!" Harris yelped in panic, staring at his parents, whom he believed to be dead. "I found your parents and saved them the day after you left them in that attic," I said, my voice steady. "Your father has heard everything from the living room." Harris went pale, the reality sinking in that his parents were indeed alive. With them as undeniable witnesses, he could no longer escape the consequences of his actions. They had been rescued and treated at the hospital, and now they were here to confront him with the truth. The night before I found my in-laws, Harris had visited their house under false pretenses. He had called each of them up to the attic one by one, claiming he needed to talk. First, he had tied up his mother and silenced her while she was alone, leaving her helpless. Then he had left his father on the floor. Afterward, he had returned home, still harboring his sinister intentions. It seemed Hara had planned to finish them off with a knife or some other tool, but an urgent phone call had interrupted him, causing him to grumble in frustration. He sneered. "It's summer anyway. They'll probably just die from heat stroke." With that, he headed off to work, ensuring they were securely gagged to prevent any cries for help. My in-laws recounted this tearfully, making it clear that they likely wouldn't have survived if they hadn't been discovered just hours later. "I wanted to understand your true feelings before putting on the cuffs," I spat, filled with disgust. "I never would have thought you could be such a filthy coward. You had no idea how much they were suffering when I found them." As I and his father lashed out at him, Harris began to tremble. It seemed he was terrified at the prospect of facing the police. "Your mother looked dead, but I couldn't do anything. I felt so helpless, while you were off cheating." Under the weight of his father's furious shouts, which reverberated like thunder, my husband curled in on himself. "But I'll never have the chance to see such a beautiful woman again. I just wanted one last glimpse before I got caught," he sobbed, still fixated on his affair partner. "Right? Is it too soon to feel this way? Why not give her a call?" At this, he grabbed his phone as if it were his lifeline, but when he dialed her number, he was met with a recorded message. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." She had clearly cut off contact. He tried calling the store, but the manager informed him she had left and promptly hung up, oblivious to the chaos that had unfolded. Harris stared blankly, disbelief etched across his face. "Actually, I went to confront her about the affair yesterday. She got furious when she found out I was married." His eyes widened in shock as I detailed how his mistress had berated him, calling him a lowlife. When I mentioned how she dismissed him for being broke, claiming she had no use for a man with bills, the realization hit him hard. I looked at him with disdain as tears filled his eyes and his lips trembled. His mistress had believed he was single, and he had deceived her into thinking he was a wealthy investor. When she discovered the truth, all interest vanished. "You fool! You thought she cared about you just because she was nice to you at the shop. That girl was only after your money, not your love." At this, my husband broke down, sobbing. "But we were really in love. Doesn't that make me the victim?" I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. I exchanged a glance with my father-in-law, and we both sighed heavily. "What are you talking about? Your parents have suffered damages amounting to $10,000. Child support for Maya is $85,000, and there's an additional $80,000 in debt. That totals $175,000. Pay now?" "Surely not. My investment debts are already causing enough trouble." "Impossible. You accumulated those debts on your own. You can't simply ignore the fact that we nearly died," my father-in-law roared, his voice echoing through the neighborhood. I shot Harris a sharp glare. In the distance, I could hear police sirens approaching. It seemed my mother-in-law had returned from her visit to alert the authorities. Huh, you actually called the cops? Sasha, please help me, Harris whimpered, shaking and crying. There's evidence that you tried to kill your parents, and now your dead mistress is under scrutiny. You'll be blamed for all of this. Doesn't that concern you? I mimicked my husband's earlier tone, keeping him in check until the police arrived, flanked by my father-in-law. Harris, with tears streaming down his face, offered little resistance as the officers took him away. My in-laws turned to me, remorse evident in their eyes. I'm sorry for raising such a foolish son. I shook my head. You two have always been kind to Maya and me. You've done nothing wrong. He's the one who strayed from the right path. We stood together, watching as the police car drove away with Harris. He was later tried for the kidnapping and mistreatment of his parents. Naturally, news of the incident spread at his workplace, resulting in his termination. His lawyer warned that he would likely spend several years in prison. Maya's grandparents took care of her child support, but they severed all ties with Harris. When he eventually gets out in a few years, he will almost certainly find himself alone, trapped in a cycle of debt. Meanwhile, Maya and I are thriving. She still brushes her bangs aside to signal impending danger, calling it her maith, as if she's a guardian watching over us. Both my in-laws and my own parents cherish her deeply. I am determined to continue protecting my daughter, who has bravely held our family together through it all.